Hello, hello.
Hello.
It's going to be a bumpy ride today. I can tell already from managing to plug in the wrong camera and drop in the things that I needed to from my burrs. It's one of those kinds of Wednesdays.
Yeah, that's every day for me.
How's
Hello,
everybody doing
everyone.
besides it being a Wednesday? Mercury retrograde. Okay, I'll take it. Give me an excuse.
Yeah, we got to be careful. I've been busy. I was out in the garden setting
Nice.
it up. I like to start early so I can enjoy it because it gets too hot sometimes.
I am so far behind on my planting schedule. It's ridiculous. I keep saying I'm going to get out there and put my seeds in, but I haven't. So I'm going to, if I'm lucky, I'll have very late peas today this year.
No
All right.
peas.
How was your show, Rachel? Your setup looked amazing.
Oh, thank you. So it's a wonderful show in terms of the community, being with all the other guild members and so on. For me, it's really strange fiscally. So it's never super fiscally successful, but it has weird things like one low-priced item will sell and one high-priced item will sell. And then I go, that's not enough for me to tell whether I have a market here or not. We were definitely impacted by the weather. We had about 6,000 fewer people, maybe a little more than we usually do, because it was bright and sunshiny in Portland for the first weekend in about 4 months. So everybody goes out to do their hiking and outdoor activities. So everywhere else that I've ever traveled, a rainy day means better traffic. But in Portland, it's the exact opposite. So it was a little sluggish overall, but I love the layout there. When I came to Portland, I didn't think I would like the idea of this. What they do is they set up each guild in its own rows. So you're not just having one shoe shop in the area, you're having all the shoe shops in the area. And I thought, well, I don't want to be next to all the jewelers, then the competition is there. But it turns out it's actually really nice because our customers can self-select which guilds they want to look at. If they're not interested in jewelry, they never come to jewelry. If they're not interested in woodworking, they skip that section. And so it's actually quite nice. And we have a fairly open floor plan, so it's not full booth setup. So you're always able to chat with your neighbors, or somebody can watch your space while you run to the bathroom or whatever. And it's cool to see the efforts of each of the guilds and how they come out and show their work differently. You know, like we're always next to the woodworkers, which I love, and they have everything from spun bowls to furniture that I would buy if I were a wealthy woman. You know, these beautiful, like rough edge, cedar planked top tables and cabinetry and all kinds of amazing stuff. And then it also includes the Glassworkers Guild, which is mostly either lamp work or fused glass. I don't think they have a whole lot of glass blowers in their guild. There may be another guild for that in the area, but they're not part of this. And then we have the Beading Guild, the Weaving Guild or Fiber Guild. I'm not sure whether they're transitioning from being only weavers. I saw some other fiber work in there, which always tempts me because they bring their hand spun and hand dyed yarns too, which was a past fixation of mine. And then the Ceramics Guild takes up a big chunk of it because there are a lot of potters in this neck of the woods. So it's cool. It's 350 artists, give or take, represented. There's demos going on all the time. It's free admission. There are other things going on at the convention center, so we always run opposite. There's a young ladies dance competition, like athletic type dance. I don't know exactly what the category is, but and so once per show we have a whole horde of them come sweeping through in their outfits on their break, trying to see what we've got here and so on. So it's neat. It's a nice little show, and you just have to be a member of one of the guilds, and then each guild has their own policies around how it works. So it's kind of cool.
Well, it sounds amazing, but no wonder you're feeling a little exhausted or out of kilter. So, and your setup and your jewelry just look absolutely amazing in your picture. So great job.
Thank you. I'm working on trimming out some of my collections, which is really painful and hard. But some of them need to go because it's not the direction my work has been going in. And so this was my first time cutting a couple of my more everyday wear kinds of collections off the table. And this isn't necessarily the show to have done that, but I need to start doing it to see how I can set up. So I took off, I think, other than a couple of bracelets that were $75, I think my low end price point was 175, and then up from there, which is a radical leap upward from, no, is that right? 175? I must have something for 150 on the bench too, but somewhere considerably higher than my previous low end price point was $65. So it's sort of a weird thing, you know, you're jumping off a cliff when you do that of, am I going to find the customer when I no longer have the things that people can grab for small gifts?
You will. Your
yeah.
work will support that.
I hope so.
It
I
will.
hope so. It's evolving, that's for sure. But it looks like we're not going to get any more folks, so we may as well get going on today's. We are so down to the last of this. It's a little freakish. Like, I'm actually looking ahead to what we're going to do, like how I'm going to break it up for the last chapters, because we're going to get through most of chapter 7 today, if things go according to plan. And then there's only one set of, there's one more setting that we'll try in chapter 7 next time. And I think there's only really one setting, maybe there's 2 versions that I can pull out of the tension setting in chapter 8. And then that's the end of the book. So we're looking at about 3 more sessions. This one included 3 sessions total to get through the rest of the book. I'm going to then take a breather for probably a month, and then come back with the idea. I liked the idea you had, Wendy, of doing some review of the images in the book and seeing what we can find. And it doesn't have to, I realized it doesn't have to just be in the book. It might be that any piece of jewelry from any artist that you've seen that you wonder how it happened, we bring it and discuss it in the context of the settings that we've learned in the book. That would actually make me a little more comfortable than springing all kinds of images from John's collection up on, or, you know, from the pictures from the book up on screen. And then I'll go back and do the catch-up ones that I wanted to do, the do-it-agains that people are asking for, or that I'm asking myself for. And so I'll put out a schedule for those. I'm suspecting I'm going to want to go down to once a month when I start doing those. Just because I'm hitting my busy season for shows. So that'll make it a little less stressful to me. But today we have a really cool setting that is weirdly in this section instead of in the tension setting side of things, although he mentions it again as if he himself was debating whether this should have been in the tension setting. So it's almost like he started to include it there and then edit it back to this chapter. So if you're playing along at home, we are on page, we're going to actually start on 167, which is false channel setting. I'm going to talk briefly about channel setting, and just because he mentions it before we get into it. So true channel setting is quite literally notched positions for each stone. And what we're doing is we're making a running channel and counting on the stones abutting each other. They sort of slot in, right? So we're not learning true channel setting. That if you want to learn that, I recommend, oh my goodness, what is the name of the fellows school in Tennessee? New Approach School in Tennessee has setting classes and so on for that kind of, that goes along with how do I precision set a diamond? How do I, you know, and they have, I think it's 2-week intensives. They may have a 1-week version of the class. I'm dying to go there one of these days. But they're like full on, everything's done under the microscope, everything, you learn how to manage your burrs really precisely. It is a setting school program. In higher end jewelry world, especially in prior generations, stone setters and jewelers are 2 separate skill sets. So the jewelers make the jewelry and hand it off for the stones to be set. And that channel setting is one of those techniques that goes into you learn to be really good at it if you're a stone setter. So what we're doing is false channel setting, and I'm going to point out that John says somewhere in here that you can do it with round or square or rectangular. I would add to that you can actually do it with any shape that has an equal set of, not equal set of sides, a parallel set of sides or points that you can connect it to. So for example, not a good false setting is not a good one for a trillion, because we don't have 2 points opposite each other, smooth lined, right? We need something that the faceted stone has to be a faceted stone, that the faceted stone's girdle is going to slot in equally on both sides, and that you have a set of them that are really, really, really darn close to the exact same size. Like maybe practice first with manufactured stones. I personally prefer this particular look with the square, or with anything but round. Like with round, it sort of looks like there are gaps that are not intentional, because what we end up getting is the little triangle of open space between each round. And it feels more fragile to me for some reason. I really like the abutting, fully touching stones. But I've also done this setting with, I'm going to forget the name of the cut. Is it maybe an Asher? No. So there's a cutting that is sort of a cross between a curved wall setting and a curved wall stone and a either a rectangle or sometimes even an emerald cut, but it has curved long sides and flat end sides. And it's a really elegant little stone to just slot in there. You can get them in from Rio. They sell CZs in the shape that I'm describing. I just can't for the life of me remember what the shape is called. And those as a series run longwise are really pretty down the middle of this setting, because it gives a little bit less of that open triangle thing that the round ones do. So other than that, it's a pretty basic setting. You could potentially make it a little fancier by doing some patterning on your outer wall. But it's a half a tube with some stones sliding along it. There's not a whole lot of excitement to it. And it is counting on tension. And it's also counting on a stitch, which is probably why it landed in this setting, in this chapter. So remember that we learned stitching as part of how do we set up bead setting. We're going to do the itty bittiest little stitch at the end of the setting for this one. And all it's doing is acting as a lock. Basically, our setting should be so tightly tensioned that there's no room for movement. If you're doing this right, you should be holding your breath as you put the stone in the final time to make sure that it's not moving around. Like it should be hard to push in there. We're going to actually take the end of, in this case, he's recommending a cut-off toothbrush and sort of force it in there. So you don't want to do this with fragile stones either, because you can chip against each other and that sort of thing. So with that in mind, I'm going to show you what I've put aside for us. It's also one that you don't want to go much bigger than, I think he said 5 millimeter. I'm going with 4 millimeter squares for this one. Let me zoom in a little bit so you guys can see these better. Oop, wrong way. Gotta get the where am I game going. There we go. So I've got a set of squares and I pulled more than I'm going to use, just so that in case I find one I don't like along the way, I can change it out. These are cheapo, what are they, garnets. And so I'm not too worried about them if I do chip them, but I wanted to give myself some options here. Oh, actually, that's not even the set. I think that's the other set I pulled that I already filtered a batch of them that I want to use. And I am going to be doing these. I'm going to do 4 of these set. Ooh, where am I? Opposite of where I expect to be. So I'm going to set 4 of these in a channel. And because they're 4 millimeters, give or take a 0.01, I'm going to need a bar that is 16 millimeters wide. But here's something that John doesn't say in his book. He describes it as if we're doing round stones. And he says you want it to be just the width of the total dimensions of the stone. But what I'm doing with squares is giving myself like 1/3 to 1/4 of a millimeter extra for a square, because with a round, there's going to be room for you to get in at the curve to make your stitch. But with a square, if you made it exactly the width, you would have no place to stitch to. It'd be really awkward. You'd be just doing it off the end of the piece. So I'm giving myself a smidge extra. I may end up filing more of it down once I see how they fit, and we'll go from there. So I have already annealed this because you guys have watched me anneal before and you don't need to see that again. And I've found a rod of some kind. It could be a drill bit. It could be one of your DAPs, whatever has a nice consistent roundness to it. You don't want to taper. And I'm going to tape this down, squared on, with just some painter's tape or masking tape, whatever you've got. And you want to have
what is the width of your rod?
My rod is 3 and change. It was the closest one I could find. Let me get you the exact. You want to be about 1 millimeter smaller for your diameter of rod than the diameter of your stone. So I am at 2.92 on this one because I didn't have a perfect 3. So I'm erring on the side of a little smaller rather than a little bigger, because the goal of this is we're going to make a little U that is snugger closed than what our stone width is. So that gives us our tension, and then we're going to open it back out a little bit, trying to spring tension it basically. So dimensions of depth, you can make it super deep if you want to, but you need to at least make it deep enough that we're going to have room to set our stone somewhere around, let me draw this instead of just making fingernail marks on it. Somewhere around here is where we're going to make our little channel. And that is going to leave us enough that our stone girdle will just hit right about the top. So our stones will stick up right like this.
Move your tape.
Oops, sorry. So we're making a channel here. And then our stone girdle is going to slide in there. So our tables are going to peek up just to the edge of this material. We can always plan on filing a little excess away if we need to, but we don't want them peeking up over too much, if at all. And then we need to give ourselves enough room that if we put the U in there, whatever our culotte is, it's not going to poke the bottom of the U. So we're going to give ourselves a fair amount of material and know that we can always cut some more away down the road if we want. This is going to be tricky to get nice and square on because my rod is a little bent. Which I don't know when that happened, but somebody's been abusing this rod.
Rachel, you need to spot yourself.
Oh, thank you. I had it on my documents and then I forgot to do it. Spotlight. There we go. That will help you guys see this. So let me go over those again, just because I know I wasn't spotlit. So we need at least enough material that we're going to put our mark, we're going to carve in our channel here so that the stones stick up, sort of meeting the upper edge. And then our stones need enough room in the U that the tips of them don't bump against the opposite side. You can go deeper. You can make these really deep if you want to, but think about what we're going to use it for. Are we going to hang it as a pendant? If it's too deep, it'll tip on us. Are we going to use it as an earring? We don't want it sticking out so far and so weighty that it tips off the ear. So generally just a little bit beyond where you think the culotte is gonna land is a good amount to go. We can again always file some off later. And I'm going to tape this down just temporarily. And then pinch it in my bench pin, my ring clamp. At that point, and then John recommends a piece of wood. I happen to have another wedge from my other ring clamp, and I'm just going to push it over. Remember, we've annealed this metal already, so we're just trying to use it as a fulcrum against our piece. Now, if you see, like I'm seeing, I'm getting a little out of alignment, so I got an opportunity to straighten it out a little bit before I bend it further. I want to make sure I'm keeping similar amounts of material all the way across. And I am using 20 gauge. You could use 20 gauge, you could use 18. Once I've gotten it to a certain point, I need to go the rest of the way on a different surface so that I can get it pushed further over. And I'm going to want to straighten this out even more. My U is a little bit wonky. So I'm going to use some pliers to make some adjustments, just to sort of torque it back on square. You'll also know it's going off track if it starts to be skewed off the edge. So what I was seeing that made me realize that was that it was twisted a little bit like this. You guys see how it kicks over the lip. So I'm putting it back into position, which means it's lined up. And then I'm going to close it down even further to get it nice and snug. And I'm going to probably want to put the rod back in and get it nice and tight up against that. So I'm not averse, he doesn't mention doing it, but I'm not averse to a little bit of mallet work. Really get it snug down against my U, even if it means closing it a little further than I intended, because I can work it back from there. So I've now got a basic U. This is a fairly deep U. I may not have needed to make it quite so deep. And I am going to be putting my stones slotted down the center. So I've made this quite snug. It looks like I'm going to need to open it up a little bit to get close to what I need, which means I may want to get another rod out that try and find something that's a little bit better sized for this perfect setting. Or I may just want to open it with my hands a little bit and play around. Let's see what I can get. So the key to this one is definitely getting the right snugness on this. And what I'm looking at is, will my stone, let me zoom in a little bit, see if I can hold this in a way that you guys can actually see. So what I'm looking for is just barely wider, I mean, narrower at the top than the width of my stone, which is
Bring it up a little bit, Rachel, please.
Yep. Trying to get the stone in place for you guys to see, but it doesn't want to stay. Go. So I'm still a little wide. Oh, still out of picture. I'm a little wide at the top. So I'm going to square this up a little bit more because ultimately I'm going to be cutting a channel into either side that will slot down. So I don't want it resting across the whole piece. I want it to be just inside of my lines. Again. So now I'm hitting the area, like the amount of material showing on each side that gets me a little more comfortable that it's going to slot in there, because I can sit the stone on there and it'll just sort of rest, but I can still see a little smidge of metal on either side, which tells me that I'll be able to slot it in there when I get there. So the next act is to make a score line on the opposite side and trim this down. And the reason we left all this extra is it needs the fulcrum, or else you're going to have a really hard time if you just take a little piece and try to bend it. So I'm going to score the other side when I find my scoring tool. There we go. And all I'm doing is running it along the line of the other wall, the short wall, and then we'll saw that off. Or if you've got snips, you could snip it. Oops, I'm not zoomed out enough for you guys, am I? Wrong way. You know, I feel like the device just switches which direction I have to push. No matter what direction I choose, it's the wrong one. Okay, so I've got a good basic view. Starting now, and I'm going to do some filing and cleanup on it. Let's see about grabbing just a nice coarse file to start, flat file. Because what I want is a well squared, equally lined up from both sides, flush surface along the top. This file is just not cutting it right.
Rachel, I have a question.
Sure.
At what point would you be considering the bail if you're doing a pendant?
Yep.
What is that going to look like?
So I have actually plans to put on one of the bales he describes in there, which is just a simple tube. We need to get everything positioned first in our rough positioning. We're not going to set it, but we're going to position everything and make sure we have our lines lined up. If you are wanting to think ahead to how am I going to bale it, some of your choices are, the one that we're going to do is we're going to put a little a notch in here. We're going to file down with a circular file, and we're going to set a tube into the back of it right along this stretch. Another option, if you've left yourself enough room below the stone so that it's not poking the coulette, is you can drill through to either side and just run a chain or a cord or whatever you decide you want to. Anything that's sort of jump ring-esque is going to want to run, let me draw this for you. So, and if we have this U and our stones are going to be in here, right? Running down. Anything that's jump ringy is going to want to probably go this way along the back. If you put it this way, you're going to have a hard time with this wanting to tip back on itself. It'll try to flip. You could potentially put jump rings off either side, but if we looked at that from the front, what we would get, it'll look like ears on the piece, which I personally hate. So here's what we're building right now. However many we're doing. And if we put, there's our U in the back. We put jump rings to put our chain to it. It looks like handles or ears to me. So I'm not
It's a
inclined to-
monkey.
Yeah, it looks like a little monkey. So what we're going to do is the version where we're carving in, and then we're going to add a tube that runs partway along the back, which will give it some good support. And so a chain or a link or whatever can go in there. You don't want too deep of it, too big of a tube, because then it'll again tilt downward to rest against the body on this corner. And that's part of why we cut away a little bit to set it in. So in truth, what we're going to aim for is really our tube is going to sort of be like that in the piece, right? Sort of cutting where it would have been halfway down the middle. Is that making sense?
Cool.
And then, of course, the one that he shows in the examples is an earring, which is, this is a cool little fancy schmancy little earring. You just put a post on there and you're golden. You just have to make sure that, like, if you go super long on these, make sure you're thinking about where you position the post, again, for overall weight and tippiness.
Can this be incorporated into a ring?
I
This type of setting?
suppose. I mean, yeah, it's not a super protected setting, because anything that bangs the ends could, you know, we're only holding it there really with a little stitch of metal. So if it gets banged around, it could be problematic. But could I see it, like, let's say you made an inset, like you made a little box frame for it, and this sat down inside of the box frame, so it was a little protected. Sure.
Yeah.
I would make it shorter than the U that I've made. I'd probably keep it pretty close to the vest.
Okay, right?
Yeah, it's not got a lot of variation. Again, patterning the outside could be nice. You don't want to overweight the frame such that you can't keep the tension on it. And the more you solder stuff onto it, you know, the more you're annealing it. So get that out of the way before you do any final bending and work hardening. Like do it while it's flat, maybe.
Mhm.
Still a little messy. Switch to sandpaper to get this a little cleaner. Stone out of the way. And you probably, before you set, you really want to get a polish up in the U itself, because that's the mirror reflection that's going to be behind the stones. So a lot should happen before you do final set on this guy. Take a little bit off the edges too. I'm just blunting where I've been cutting and filing a little bit on the edges. And then I'm also going to take a little tiny bit off the corners just to sort of soften and round them. Okay, so now we've got our basic U into which our stones will theoretically slide once we put our channel in. Get unstuck from this tape. So that the theory is they'll be resting down inside, but at about that kind of a spacing. Zoom in for you. Yep, no matter what I do, I always pick the direction opposite of what I mean to. There we go, there we go. Sorry, guys. Trying to get a close-up of these teeny tiny stones.
That's nice.
Right,
So
so what we're doing, and
Cool.
ideally, we're going to put our cut mark just low enough that this will be flush with this top bar. Oops, I'm out of frame, aren't I?
Mhm.
Okay,
So
so
Rachel,
The table of the stone will be flush with the channel.
with the upper wall of the
Edge.
channel, yeah,
Yes.
that give or take.
so
meaning-
I have a question, Rachel.
Go ahead.
Normally you would put like the inside to hold the stone, you know how you put a little bezel on the inside.
Mhm.
Step is.
Are you going to put like a line, or is it really just
We're making a channel. If you think about this, this is a long version of a channel of the cut that we do when we're doing, like when we're setting a seat. We're just setting the seat from two sides. So if I can figure out where my erasing materials are. So we're quite literally making this thick-walled U. It's going to be straighter than my drawing. And we're going to be making a cutaway
okay? Okay.
instead of a wall. And so this is why this one only works with faceted stones, right? We need the girdle to set right in there.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then we're going to slide a whole bunch of them through. And that's why it's a false channel set, because we're making one long channel along here and just pushing them in like, I don't know, like train cars back to back. Whereas in a true flush setting, what we would have is a notch here. Let's say we're doing round stones, and a notch here, and then our round stone sets right there. And then we'd have another notch here and a notch here, and our round stone would set there. So the only place it can click in is in the spot that it's been cut into. So we're faking that by doing the long run channel. And we're also, if we're doing true channel setting, we'd be using setting burrs. In this case, because we're making a long line of it, what we're about to do is mark and then saw as a starting point. These are all skills that we learned in earlier settings. I'm opening it back up a little bit so I can reach things, by the way.
Okay,
We're gonna
I
use a
just turned
saw
the page.
first. Pardon?
I'm sorry, I just turned the page and I get it now. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
On
On page 168.
And then we're going to use a triangle file and make our notch.
Okay, cool.
If you have much better hand control than I do and can do a straight line with a heart burr, you could absolutely do this with a heart burr. I jump all over the place when I'm trying to get a straight line. And it's not part of what John recommends. So with that in mind, if I can find my black Sharpie, my thick black Sharpie, where the heck did it go? Oh, there we go. I'm going to Sharpie my inside lines so that I can see my marks. And then with my dividers, I'm looking for something that is aligned just a little bit lower than the height from the base of my girdle to the top of the table. So I don't need much on these because these are really shallow stones. I think I'm going to go right about there.
So what is your measurement? The girdle to the table?
So from just at the base of the girdle, the bottom of the girdle, up to the table will get me, if I mark my line there and I cut and notch, then I will be just shy of the top of the frame when I put my settings in place, my stones in place rather. And in this case, my stones are pretty darn rough. So some of them may stick a little higher than others because they're all kind of crappy cuts. Hopefully you're working with cleaner stones. I just didn't have anything in square that was well cut that I was willing to give up for a demo. Okay, so I don't know if you guys can see it, but I've just scored on both sides. It's important that you're doing this at the same time to both sides. And then using a saw blade, I'm going to start making those score marks into actual lines. And this is a little tricky, and I wish I could get a better position for you guys to see. Let me see if I can do it up in the air. It's going to be hard to get a straight line and be visible to you guys. So I'm going to just start by doing some down draw of the saw blade along my score. Yeah, I can't do that in midair. Sorry, guys.
And what size saw blade do you have?
I'm using my go-to of 2/0. You can go finer. What our goal here is to give ourselves a channel that our triangle file can follow. I wouldn't go heavier than that. And one of the things to be really careful of is that we tend to go deeper in the outer edges of this than we do on the center. So try to be really conscious of hitting all of the spots of the sawing. Try to get your line really all the way down, not just at the ends, without cutting through. And again, all I'm doing is deepening my score. I'm not trying to actually use this as my final line. It's my guideline that I'm deepening. And what makes this setting look clean is a consistent height from both sides. If you go off your measurements from one side, then all the stones are going to look tilted down or up, depending on how you're looking at it. One side of this, I've got a good clean line. The other side, not quite so much. So part of it may be if you've dinged it around a little bit, you don't have as flat of a surface as you think. I'm just tightening up that one side that's giving me grief. A little bit more. And then I'm going to pull out a triangle file. The finer you've got, the better, because it's going to give you more control. So if you have different different teeth on your, you know, if you have small files that have different teeth, go with something very fine. I gotta find a place that I can grip this where you guys can also watch. Am I still on screen? I am. Getting a good position for this. Let me try getting my bench pin out of the way entirely. Am I still in screen for you guys? No.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am. Okay. Oh, got it.
A little higher.
A little higher
Yeah, to your right.
to my right. Does that do it?
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. Just want to make sure I got this one side as well notched as I thought. And then I'm going to take the triangle file to it. And so note that our triangle files have a taper. Work with the body of it that's got the most straightness to it. Don't work up out here at the tip, or else you'll really change the depth of your filing on the ends. So I'm trying to work with the middle material of my triangle file, and I'm trying to work straight on to the line that I already cut, or that I already marked out with the saw. I don't want to tip. I want to be my flat back of the triangle should be parallel to the sides of the U. And I'm going to flip, because we all know that we file more one direction than we do the other. Again, I apologize. I know I'm blocking the view right now. And you'll sort of start to be aware of the feeling of whether the triangle file is evenly resting. Like you'll feel it lift up towards the ends if you're going too much into the small of the file. And I'm going to pause and do the other side to catch it up to that depth. Can you guys see how perpendicular this is? Like I'm going, my triangle should be as straight into the groove as I possibly can make it. I should slow down. That's what I should do. Flip sides. You see, I already went a little off course on one of the sides. So I ended up getting a sort of a double groove because I went off course at one end of one of these. I'm going to try to do a little corrective filing. Let's see if I can give you guys a close-up view. Let me even this out a little further. I've got one end that's not as well cut. So what I'm looking for is, am I seeing the V notch that I've created from both ends looking about the same depth into the material? Offsides. Because I want a channel that runs all the way across consistently. Okay, and I'm going to try zooming in for you guys and see whether I can get close enough to make it worthwhile. Ah,
That's
this is
a
like
little
a
too
bad
close
video game.
there.
There we go.
Okay.
You can see that. Yeah.
Whoa.
Okay, so can you see the groove that I've put in there?
Yes.
The notch it creates on either side?
Wow. Yeah.
That's all it takes, guys. It doesn't need a lot. So I'm going to close myself back up to the upright U, because if we've used the right size measurements, then our upright U is pretty darn close to where we need to be. And I'm going to test fit my first stone. I am too closed.
You're too zoomed in. You
Too
can't.
zoomed for you guys now, aren't I? Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so I squished it a little too far closed. So I got to gently open it a smidge. And still too far. I mean, not far enough. So what's important is that even when I'm stretching it, I need to make sure I'm staying an equal distance from each other. Like this end is tighter than this end. I need to even it out. Because the whole point of this false channel is that the stones will just run down the channel. I'm going to take, I've got a little bit of extra material right at the ends where I was filing. I want to clean it up a little bit to try and make sure I'm not scratching up my stones as they slot in.
Well, Rachel, that's what I was going to comment on when I did this setting. It was so difficult to get an even, smooth, same height channel.
Yep. There's a reason this is later in the book.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's also a good discussion topic for us as we do the post-book analysis is what are the techniques that we learned early on that grew our capability to do the later settings? I'm just trying to find some good wax to use to hold this stone a little bit better. My fingers aren't cutting it. And for me, one of it is, you know, pay more attention to the precise activities, the things that I hate doing, the nitty gritty little measurements and alignment and things like that. And his order of operations is really quite additive. Okay, gang, you can see that we are starting to get close to the fitting that we need because I can just start to get the stone in there. But what I'm also seeing is that I'm a little lopsided from where I was. And when I look at it straight on, I can see that it's because I managed to, when I was opening and closing the U, I managed to push this side a little higher than the other. Are you guys seeing that? That it starts to slot, but it tips downward?
No, no, you could
Bring it
zoom
closer.
in or bring it up to the camera.
Yeah.
Too much. There.
Okay, so
Okay.
I can slot it, just beginning to slot it in there.
Uh-huh.
But when we look at it end on, oops, now I'm out of frame again. Let me see, where am I going? There we go. When we look at it end on, it has a
Oh,
slight tilt. You guys seeing that slight tilt
Yeah.
down?
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
because what I can see is that I'm no longer flush along the top like I was. Now I got to zoom back out for you. I'm no longer flush along the top. So when I was opening and closing, I must have pushed more from one side than the other on the U. So I now have to go back and do a little corrective action to get my U. Yeah, you can actually see it quite well when I do this. You can see that it wants to lift off the front edge a little bit more than on the back edge. So I need to do some careful mallet work and or hand adjustments with the pliers to sort of straighten this back to square it up.
Oop. Careful.
All my stones with me.
And you don't feel like you need to anneal it.
I don't want to anneal it because I'm trying to get a tight tension setting. If I'm going to be annealing it one way or the other by putting in my bail, but I want to avoid as much heat. I want to avoid heat on this as much as possible while trying to make sure I'm lined up and set well. If I'm really fighting this, do I mind that you go and anneal it? No, probably not. It's just I'm so close to being where I want to be on this one that I don't think I actually need to. I'm just sort of trying to square it a little bit more. So let's see. That little further over. So you see the challenge of once it's cut short and we don't have the extended arm that we had when we were first curving it, it's much harder to manipulate because we don't have anything really to grip. It's improving a little bit. One end is a little better than the other. That makes me a little happier. It's still kind of wonky at one end. Let's see how our stone is fitting when we do this now. Okay, what I'm discovering is the girdles on these stones may be part of my problem. My girdles are quite thick for the size of the stone. So how am I going to solve that? I'm going to take my file back and I'm going to widen out my filing a little bit. In fact, I'm going to actually take a square file. I know it's not in the book, John, but I'm going to take a square file and intentionally use the diagonal of the square to make a slightly widened channel. What was the question? Did I hear somebody start to ask?
Carmen.
I guess I was just thinking, like you said, not to use a burr, but I was just wondering with that at this point, would it be any easier?
For
Because
me,
you
it
already have
wouldn't.
the
I
line.
just, I don't have the hand control, but it
Okay.
absolutely, you could use a heart burr on this. That really mucked up one end. Hang on a sec. You could absolutely, if you have the motor control and or if you have a perfectly sized bit, you could ostensibly run down the channel using, like, squeezing this across the channel and use it in both, do both sides at the same time so that you know that they're parallel, but that takes a whole lot more coordination than I personally have.
Oh, yeah. I didn't realize you had to do both.
Well, you don't have to. It's just that it would actually probably stay more in line if you did. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. And the question is whether we're getting somewhere enough. So I need my toothbrush to help me push in gently. Oh, no, we're not getting tight into the groove yet. Got one side a little wider open than the other, which may be giving me some grief. And again, all of this is just test fitting at this stage of the game. We're trying to make sure that we can actually get our set of 4 stones to slide down the channel. So far, I'm only having luck getting them to start in the channel. It's the pushing it further that's giving me the conniption fit. And you do want this to be a snug fit, but you need it to stay in the channel all the way through.
So does that toothbrush device he shows work?
It does when we get to the final setting, especially.
Okay.
Right now I'm still in fitting mode, but so yeah, I mean, if I'm nervous about pushing down too hard on the stone with a metal tool or something else. So
Oh, okay.
I've now got one in the channel, but it's not wanting to push further down, which we can try pushing from the other end and see if that makes it easier. But ultimately, it probably means that I don't have a clean enough, even enough channel, and I need to neaten up my cuts a little bit. We'll see what happens when I try to go in from the other side. The bummer is that this is with such tiny little fiddly stones, so it's, you know, your own fingers get in your way a lot on this particular activity. Interesting track. What you'll find is a lot of times they're going to want to try and jump the track. So one side will go in and then the other will try to skew. So on this one, it's trying to jump off one side's track. And it's the side that I managed to double cut, so it's not surprising. So we're getting there, but I'm not getting them pushed in far enough, and I'm concerned about the fragility of the stones. And I can clearly see that this latest one is offline and askew a little bit. So I'm going to take it back out. I'm going to take the other one back out and try to correct my cut again. So I've got one really clean side and one really sloppy side, unfortunately. And the sloppy side is what's causing problems as I try to push them down further. I'm still skewed downward on that one side. Let's go back up again. I may at this point, I've worked this enough, I may at this point have to take Wendy's suggestion and deal with annealing it just so I can get in there, because it's not wanting to move anymore on my U. The problem is I've got a beautiful side on one side and then a lousy side on the other. It's a little stubborn and do one more tap with the hammer. Oh, that makes me happier. Okay, maybe not on to annealing yet. Jump to the track about partway in. Push it back out. A little bit more snug. And the delightful part about this is that even once we get all 4 stones in there, we're still going to have to take them back out in order to put on the bail, polish it up.
Let's this.
So close I can taste it.
Okay, promo code Gmail.
Oops, somebody have a question? I keep falling. So here's what, let me show you up close what's happening, gang. Is I keep sliding out of the channel on one side. Oop, too close. So it gets partway in and then it slips out of the channel, right? So that's why I keep popping it in and out. So this side stays in the channel. This side doesn't want to. And it's the side that started messy. So let me see if I can, oh, no, it's actually not the side that started messy. So maybe I have to just even everything out a little further. And I'm going to go to the square for uneven filing for now.
But if you start from the opposite side.
Start from the other end.
Yeah.
So one end is much messier than the other. And I'm trying to go in the neater end so that it doesn't catch. Oops, sorry, I'm out of screen for you guys. So what I'm trying to do is clean up some of the burbles that I've got. Burbles is a nice technical term. The messy bits. A little bit neater at entry points. Yep, skips at the same spot. So I must have something in there that is just not cut the way it should be. Must have a sliding spot about 1/4 of an inch in from the from this one side that I'm trying to slot in. See what I can get clear there. Okay, well, we got a solid connection this time, but it's so solid I can't push it past the spot, which may mean I have an uneven gap. There we go. No, it's not moving. So, I mean, it's friction held, tension held rather, but it's too well tension held right now. Need a narrower pushing device. So I'm going to try wrapping my brass bezel pusher in a bit of tape so that it doesn't put metal against the stone. Ideally, I'd have a tiny version of my toothbrush. That's too much tape. There we go. Oh, now I pushed it all the way to the other side. Okay. I see how it is. So lots of fiddly on this one, gang. Lots of fiddly. All right. One from end to end. See if we can manage two. Yep. No, one pushed the other out of the way. All right, tightening up that end a little bit more. Is like one of those bad puzzle games from when you're a kid where you have to get the little rotating beads into the center hole or whatever. Everything has to line up perfectly. You're going out of there because you're not lined up anymore. There's one. Off the rails at the end, which means definitely not snug enough at this end. So what I'm finding to be tricky, gang, is getting just enough push to get it to the other side without pushing it beyond the end of the slot. And that's why you see me keep doing this over and over again. Frustrating as it is on screen, I'm sure it's even more frustrating in person.
I can understand that.
Oops, straighten out there, little guy. Stay in your channel. That's the whole point. I'm gonna try putting in a couple from each end and see if that makes it any easier. I may also be fighting the stones not being precision cut. If that's the wrong set for my other stones. So some of them may be ever so slightly smaller than others. Yeah, that's definitely the case. I think I managed to start with the biggest, which could be a problem. All right, let's try to find this out. Two stones in. 3 stones in. We may have to settle for 3 because I think one of these is too small for the rest of them. So, my goodness, that was a pain in the butt. Let's go in. Too far. So what we've got is now 3 rough set, one all the way to the end and the other 2 butting up against. I'd intended to have a 4th in there, but I think I managed to drop one of my stones. There it is. Maybe I have a 4th. Are you gonna fit happily? A little too small. Maybe we can get away with it if we squeeze it closer.
Success.
Success-ish. It's a little messy. It's a little lower than I wanted because of all that extra cutting in that I did. So this is now a rough fit piece. So we know that theoretically, at least, we can get them in there. I may, because my stones aren't all perfectly equal, I may need to do a little squeezing at one end or the other. Now I'm going to take them back out, knowing that they fit and knowing that my channel holds. And some of them really easy to come out and others are not going to want to come out. So those 2 end ones are definitely smaller. I think I'm going to have to make sure that I put the one big one as an end stone.
Maybe number them.
Yeah, that would be wise, wouldn't it? Let's see which ends these are going to come out. Yeah, let me mark the blue guy. The rest are all pretty equal, but this guy gets a little black spot on him.
Zoom out.
Okay. Phew. That was a tough one. All right, so now I have my base and I'm going to do any sanding and filing and so on, but I also need to come up with some kind of a bail, right? Oops, I got to back out, don't I? So I'm going to put a bail across the back of this. I don't want it too high. If I make my bail up too high, the whole piece is going to tilt like that on its bail because of the weight. So I'm going to go sort of right about there. I don't want it in the middle or it'll spin. I want it somewhere between the top and the middle. Probably at the 1/4 of the way down mark. Right? And where's my little piece of tubing? There we go. So what I'm going to do is file in a little notch for that to set in. So I'll start that with just a quick saw. Or a grip. I'll move to my triangle file after I take a sip of something. Man, my throat is getting dry. And I'll settle for the square file because it's here. And then I'm going to switch over to a round file. Except I'm going to get a better quality round file than that. Yep. My good round file.
So are you going to use a tube for the back?
Yep, I'm going to use a tube for the bail.
Okay.
So what I'm doing is I'm making a channel into which that tube is gonna rest.
Did
I
you
could
give us
probably
the,
also use a barrel burr.
did you give us the size of that tube, or is there a relationship, or?
I'm using a small scrap that my bin had sitting there. I would go with something proportional that you can get your chain through or your wire through, whatever you're gonna set. This, I consider this a fairly small and delicate setting, so I don't want something overwhelming. It's more the function of it than the form in this case. And I'm going to be going until my tubing will rest about halfway down its diameter. Go a little further and get maybe a little bit bigger round file if I have one. That's going to be a little too big. Yeah, that set doesn't have any round files. About that. I really need a medium-sized round file and don't have one apparently. So what am I gonna do? And oops, there, coarse one. Let's see. Close. I think I'm gonna have to use my crossing files to soften up the curve of this. Yeah, that looks like that'll do. Oh, no, too big a gap. Definitely need a larger something to get this curve better.
I'm like you, Carmen, I need to turn the page. Page 171 has all of the bail setting.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
All right, so I think aside from being ever so slightly tilted, that's pretty good. Let me see if I can straighten that out or else it will drive me bonkers. All right, so that's all I'm doing is I'm giving myself a little bit of a seat that I'll be able to fill with solder. Where are we sitting?
Oh,
Guys
that's
seeing
cute.
that?
Yeah. Mhm.
The glare on it looks a little bit like a mailbox right now, but it'll be enough to run something through to hang it. Okay, so now I have to see if my soldering cam will actually activate. Apple in its infinite wisdom decided to do a massive update to my camera, so bear with me a second. Oh, I might have a camera after all. Continue. Skip this. Give me a sec, guys. It's being obnoxious and wanting a security code. Yeah, I may not be able to get a camera over here, so I'm going to give you guys my see me from across the room view as I go over to the soldering station. Because the software update is insisting on answers that I couldn't give it right now. So, just a basic soldering exercise on this, and if possible, we want to be really quickly in and out so that we're not doing too much annealing of the overall piece. And we're going to use hard solder because we've done nothing else to this piece. I would make sure that my tubing is all nicely finished before I solder this on, which in this case, this scrap happens to be well finished. Well centered. Come on, little guy. Go. Okay. Quench that. And we're going to toss it in the pickle. And I'll take any questions on that painstakingly long touch up, measure, tweak, file, test, do it all over again, throw it out the window when you get angry at it. Any questions on that base concept? I mean, it's precision, filing and sawing. That's what it comes down to. Okay, while we wait for that to pickle,
And
because
your
it does
stones, and your stones being
yeah.
as close in match as possible.
Yep. Yeah. Were I able, I would be doing that with calibrated, perfectly calibrated, ideally the manufactured stones, so you know they're really down to the 0.01 equal sizes.
They're supposed to be small stones, correct?
Yeah, the maximum that he recommends is 5 mm.
Okay.
I feel like I'm in a giant shadow. Bear with me, guys. There we go. It's a little better. Oh no, my lighting is bad today. I'll live. I'm ready for my close-up. But he's recommending 4 mm as the perfect size. These are 4 mm squares. And again, this probably would have been a smidge easier on me had I used round stones, because there's fewer points of contact. With the square stones, what you're running up against is that the edges have to really smoothly slot all the way across. Whereas with the round stones, it's just the points out at the edge that are sliding down. I just am so enamored of this look of the back-to-back square stones, though. It looks so much more interesting to me than the round ones do. Or in a wider U, you know, a rectangular stone of some kind. So why not make it more challenging? What the heck? So meanwhile, while that's pickling, and then we'll do a little, I'll probably toss it in the tumbler or something. I want to go on to chapter 7 and talk about beads and pearls and gem balls. Oh my. I've never in my life owned a gem ball. It didn't even, like, to me, a gem ball is a bead, but it's not. The difference is whether it's half cut, you know, half drilled or full drilled or not. If it's full drilled, it's a bead. If it's half drilled, it's a gem ball, apparently. And so it's still a round-ish object. Some pearls are also flat bottomed, so you can use those. Except that the techniques he's showing us are for truly round objects. And you can get all the way drilled through, but there's usually a different sort of setting you might do if you've got it all the way around. You want to have some kind of capper on it. You might want to make a little topper, tiny disc of silver or gold, and then put it on a post and run the post through and do a very, very careful rivet setting from behind into a drill, into a full drill. Yeah, it just doesn't look good if you've got a full drill pearl and you don't have anything capping it. So what we're doing is working with partially drilled pearls, and I have recut some discs, and he's got on page, so we're on page 175 moving on to 176, and up at the top he has all those cool, very tiny cutaway type things that he can do for decorative stuff. Let me show you the size of the pearls that I afford to work with, because man, if he's doing that much decorative on his pearl cups, I don't know what size pearls he's using. So these are the pearls I'm using. They are, what are they? Zero this out. Looks like they're 8 and change, 8.1-ish. And so one of the most basic things to do is to do a cup for it, a cup with a post. And what he recommends is that we do 1/3 to 1/4 of the size if we're doing a cup. That's if you want the cup to pretty much disappear. Oops, see if I can get it to stay. Disappear under the pearl, right? That's going to be completely hidden. If you want some of the cup showing, which if I were going to do some of those decorative cuts that he describes on the top of page 176, I would probably want my cup to come a little bit higher up, because this is really not going to be seen. If you're doing a single traditional like pearl earring on a post, then this is absolutely the way to go, because then it's all about the pearl, right? By the way, if you have wooden wooden clothespins, great for doing this kind of work, and we're going to use them when we set it. So maybe I can show you proportionally that way. You can see it's not going to fit, it's not going to show beyond the curvature of the pearl. So that 1/4 to 1/3 won't show when you look at it from the front, like a traditional pearl earring. But if you intentionally want something that shows a little bit more, go a little larger than he's talking about. Either way, with a cup, you're going to do a gentle dapping. So let me bring my dap set over. I'm in my room on the bench today. If you are going to do any cutaways or anything, you're going to do them before you dap. So do any decorative filing and so on before this. And I do recommend that. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to ask you, do you know approximately how big your disc is so I can take a note?
Yeah, absolutely.
In relationship to your bead.
On my 8.1, I am doing 6.4 disc.
Oh, okay, great. Thanks.
So also it helps if you put a center point mark in your disc before you dap. And then in my preferred world of dapping, I'd have a wooden tool on a metal dap or a metal tool on a wooden dap. But I don't have stuff in the wood that's small enough for this. So I'm going to go and do the gentle tap. If you've got any kind of pattern on your metal, that wood on metal or metal on wood is a critical thing, because metal on metal is going to be marring that pattern. So I just used a wide one to get myself a basic curve. And then, oops, I need smaller daps. My goal is not to have a super deep cup. My goal is to have one that follows the curve of the pearl. So let's see what else I got here that'll fit.
Rachel?
This. Yeah.
Did you say you used a dapping punch? I mean, not a dapping punch, but a hole punch to do that disc?
A circle cutter. I did use a circle cutter for it. Yeah.
Okay.
And so while you're doing this particular dap, don't overdo it. You want to, again, make sure that it's going to follow the exact curve. I may have gone overboard. Well, no, that's actually pretty darn good. So you want your pearl to, there shouldn't be any gap between where your pearl rests when the whole hole is down. And that's looking pretty good. I could probably flatten it a smidge. So cup and pearl, right? Rests pretty nicely in there, so much so that it wants to roll away. Let's see. Pretty good curve following the pearl. If you have gapping anywhere around it, you have not followed that curve well. If there's a gap around the edges, it probably means it's too flat and you should dome it a little more until it's snug around the curve. Because what you don't want is stuff getting in there and working its way towards the peg. So basic pearl, basic gap cup. And now we're going to tape this baby down because we need to drill it. This is going to want to spin like crazy on me, so that's why I'm doing a little bit of taping to give myself something to protect. And then switch it out for a small drill bit. And what I'm using, so John has notes in the book on page, the top of page 177. Those are not little bark patterns. They are the variations on the theme of what kinds of posts you can use. And my go-to is square wire. So I'm going to actually not be on the close-up cam on that. I'm going to talk about this a little bit. So pegs, their job is to have as much surface area of the epoxy as possible holding the stone, right? So a traditional plain old like earring post style round peg only has the surface area and there's room for it to rotate and room for it to slide up and down off of the round. If you do any of the variations that he shows at the top there, either putting literally that wackadoodle hexagon at the top is a tap and die tap set. And so what you're doing is you're putting threading as if it were a screw. The next one is square wire, which is my go-to because it literally gives the maximum surface area because we're going to twist the square wire. And so it not only creates the screw effect, but it also has wider surface into which the glue is able to pass even more so than the other variations. And then the last one there is either using a file or using snips to put little hash marks in the wire. That one I can never do because I don't have a delicate enough touch and I invariably cut through my wire. So I go with square wire. But it's important that you maximize your surface area and don't just go round peg in the pearl, right? At the end, though, we're not going to get to it this session, but in a later session, we're going to do the one that John describes as really trying. He uses a great term for it. I can't remember what it is, but we're going to, the final setting for pearls on this is the wedge, which the reason it's terrifying is that there's no getting it back off. The only thing to do is drill out what you put in, like with a drill bit, metal drill bit, drilling out the silver or gold or whatever you worked in. So these variations, there are ways to get it off, either hot water, soaking it over and over again until it loosens up, or using, if you have to, an acetone. The problem is some pearls nacre will be dulled by that, not all pearls, but it can really work into it. So he recommends working your way, first trying the warm water approach where you're doing, like you put it in boiling water or recently boiled water, not immediately bubbling boiling water, and leave it there for a few minutes. Try and twist it a little bit to loosen it. If it doesn't go all the way, redo it. If it doesn't go all the way, redo it. Do that 4 or 5 times. If that doesn't work, then you go to soaking it in rubbing alcohol. and seeing if that loosens things up overnight. If that doesn't work, then you go to an acetone or something like that, right? But what he doesn't want you doing is tormenting the pearl in order to get it off, because it's really easy to chip the nacre of the pearl. So for this one, we're going to drill a hole, and that's the other thing. Surface area of the connection of the post. You could just solder it straight down to the surface, but then all that's holding it is the surrounding solder on the peg, right? So your two other options for more stability and stronger connection is, one, to do a little cup burr in the center and dome out a space, and then you're going to soften the end of your post to put it in there. Or the other is to actually drill through, if that's an option, and you're able to clean it up from behind, so that your post is soldered all the way through. That's the maximum strength you can get, because it's terrible for your pearl to snap off because the post breaks off. So we're trying to maximize the connectivity there. I made myself some square wire of the right size because I didn't have any in stock. And so it's more square rectangular-ish wire. But what I care about is it going to fit in my pearl hole as is? And let me go back to the right camera for that. So is it fitting in the pearl hole? Because once it is, then if I twist it, it should still fit, because all I'm doing is a spiral of the same dimension. And it's always handy to have a pearl reamer in case you need to open these up a little bit, because then you have one. And we don't need very much sticking out. So I'm going to just twist the ends of this. If you're doing a lot of setting of pearls, I would make myself the appropriate size square wire or buy it, and do a twist in a vise, so you have a bunch of it pre-twisted and ready for you the next time you want to do one. So for this, what I'm going to actually do before I even drill my hole is get my little block, and I'm going to take the end of this wire and hammer it back to round-ish, because then I can put it through the drill hole I'm about to make. Figure out where to put the right hammer. So I'm just forging it back on the very end from the square-ish shape to a more rounded one.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Are these methods of using the tap and die screw, or what you're doing right now with the square, are these for securing the half drilled pearl onto a piece of jewelry or for pierced ears?
No, it's absolutely for the attaching it to the piece of jewelry.
Great. Okay, that's where I got lost.
Yeah, we
All right,
we don't want to do tap and die screws all the way through somebody's ears. You might sometimes.
I don't know how you do, yeah.
You might
thanks.
sometimes do it. There are earring backs that are designed as screw-on earring backs for better connectivity.
That's right. Yeah.
But that's usually only the back, like 1/3 of the post, I think.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. And you want to make sure that you burnish those twist marks down if it's going through the ear. No, what we're talking about here is purely the connection, because we're trying to maximize the amount of glue that connects to the pearl interior, basically. All right, so I've now got something rounder-ish, and now I'm going to pick a drill bit that is ever so slightly smaller than that, which is going to be fairly itty-bitty, so I may have to go to my set of tiny drill bits. Where an 8 is going to be way too small. Still way too small. Let's try that as our starting point. So as a reminder, I've told you guys in past sessions that on the skinny drill bits, I like to snap off a bunch of the back of the bit. You can either put it in a vise, or if they're this small, you can often just put them in a pair of pliers and snap them off. Just don't get that steel in with your silver. And the reason that I do that is it has less room to torque on me as it's spinning. So I have more fine motor control over it. You can see I've only got a little bit sticking out. Always want to check that it's spinning true. Put a little bit of burr life on it and then find my little guy here. And I've got a pre-marked center point on this one. I'm hoping I can control this with the tape. Okay, that's gotten through. Now we got to see if it's a big enough hole for what I just rounded. May not be. So not very centered. Close, but not quite. So if you've got a tiny little hole that is the most minute smidge too small, rather than finding another drill bit, take your burnisher or your scribe rather, and just rotate it in the hole from both sides, pushing fairly firmly, and you'll open up and successfully burnish off some of the edges of what your drill has left. I think it's called scarf, the scarf, is that the right term for it? The little bits of metal that attach.
I think it's perf, maybe.
Kerf, scarf, I don't know. Somebody can look it up for me. So I'm almost there, but this is not quite widening enough with this. I may have to go up a drill bit size. Let's see if I can do anything sharper and burnishier. Because what I want is for my peg to go through, but have a hard time getting through, because I want it solidly in place when I am soldering it down. I don't want it floating, trying to move around. No, I definitely need to go up a drill bit size or two. And it's a clumsy day for me. The drop seems like crazy. Let's see how we do here. Actually saw filing on wood instead of metal. Not a bad way to go. Let's see. Square wire. End that is tamped down. There we go. That's the fit I'm talking about. Okay. Whoop. Almost. Hang on a sec. So what I want is for my peg to really have to stay put while I'm there. Right? I'm switching back over for the quick solder that puts this in place. Because I did not have that camera update in my plans. And this one I'm going to solder from behind. I'm just going to put it in a pair of third hand tweezers on its rod of square wire. I don't know if you guys can see that so well, but it looks like a little mushroom right now. And quick little bit of solder. If you've got chip solder, this is a good use for it. Got my solder all on the wrong side though. Let me see. Take it around. And what we want is for the solder to flow all around the hole we've drilled so that we would see it on the other side coming through. So this for me is just a quick flicking action to avoid melting anything out because these are both fragile components. There we go.
And then it's still hard solder?
I'm still using hard solder, yeah, because this is first time soldering. And with Ron, anything you can do with hard solder, whether it's your first solder or your 17th, he considers it a plus. The only thing he does with soft solders is, with easy solders rather, is he attaches the settings to things. Okay, so I've now got my very well soldered. You can see the solder coming through. Let me zoom in. Maybe you can see the solder coming through. Yeah. So we've got solder that's, I soldered it from back here, but the solder has flowed to the upright position. You don't want to use too much solder because it can jam up how the pearl can sit. And now I'm going to do my twisting on the square wire. So with this, I've left the extra on because it gives me something to grip, but I can also sort of grab from the other end and just twist. And what I'm trying to do is get that little bit of extra surface area, ideally down at the bottom where it's going to hold the pearl the most, so that there's a little bit of a coil there. This also acts as a hardening. So you want to do this towards the end after you've attached this to what you want. And it straightens it a little bit. And then we're going to snip our excess off. And it may take a couple of snips to figure out where you need it to stop. Got way more than I need here, and I may need to do a little bit of reaming out of the pearl. So it really acts almost as a screw if it's the right snugness of fit. I have a smidge too much, I can tell, because it's not going all the way. Oops, I'm too far away for you guys. It's not going all the way to the bottom. So I've got a little bit too much material. I'm going to undo it and trim a tiny bit more off. There we go. So with a good fit, it's going to sit like a little yarmulke. For those of you that know what a yarmulke is.
Yeah.
It's got a clean fit. There's not going to be any gapping around. And that is what we're going to epoxy on, right? So that's all. You know, if I were going to then put a post, I would do that soldering before I do anything else and then clean it all up and what have you. But that's all for a base post. And the square wire makes the difference. And you saw how hard it was. Like I had to actually screw it on at first. That's the level of snugness you want, as long as you're using square wire. If you are insistent on using round wire, it's got to be enough room for you to get some epoxy in there, but it should still be a fairly close fit. It's not going to be, if you use a round wire and it is a very snug fit, there's absolutely no room for the epoxy. So make sure that you're doing, you know, a little bit to slide it on. And now that I've screwed this in, it sort of acted as a little bit of a drill bit to the piece. So that's one pearl option.
So what is the gauge of that post wire?
It's based on whatever the hole you have drilled is.
Okay,
So for
because,
mine,
yeah,
I can tell you this piece, once twisted, where's my little gauge? And for example, pearls are often more delicately drilled than say a bead. So a bead would need something heavier.
well, my thinking was, why didn't you just extend that wire and make it the ear wire? But you're
great question. You could ostensibly make it one single rod. And then but then you have to do like the act of putting the little nut holding slot in your ear post and so on. But yeah, absolutely. I've seen people just do a straight rod. Remember that mine is square and I wouldn't want square coming out the other end. So it's like, 6 of one, half dozen of the other. If you're really, really good at forging, I suppose you could forge just the other end of the round wire to be square and use that, or you just solder and it'll hide the back spot that you've just soldered to.
okay. Question answered.
Yeah. So on my gauge, when it's twisted, it's got a sort of about 0.85-ish millimeters for this size pearl, and this drill that I've got, this post that I have fitted. Okay, so that's option 1 on the pearls. Where are we? 627. Then option 2 is is when you're doing something on a flat surface. If you don't want a cup on it and you just want a basic attached pearl. So I found lots of stuff in my scrap bin last night as I was looking for things to do. So we're going to have another option where we're making a nice simple sort of Zen necklace where we're going to attach a post onto this dapped and negative space block, just a little offset, right? 2 options again. We can 1, drill the hole for the post and put it through, or 2, we can ball burr it. I'm going to try ball burring this with this thickness, just so we can see the 2 different approaches. And I will. Have you guys seen a tap and die in use, or do you want me to try and model that? I've got some yeses and some nos. I'm getting
I've never seen it.
Never seen it? Okay.
I have no idea how that works.
So I will try a tap and die. Tap and dies are really cool, and the place you should look for them is in antique tool places, like junk shops and so on. And mine is in fact from an antique shop. It has this awesome box and everything. And they come in sets, and what you're looking for ideally is a machinist set. Ooh, mine might not be thin enough. I might not have small enough taps for the size that we're working. I definitely do not. Shoot. Well, I don't think I can demo for this, but I'll try and demo it in something else down the road. The basic principle of it is that you have a side that you can twist your wire into that creates the threading, and then you have something that you can drill into a hole with that creates the threading on the inside of the nut or whatever you're doing. So these have matched sets. One size matches one size specifically, and you put your wire in something stable, and then you twist and twist and twist, and this turns a solid round wire into a screw. And you put whatever you're putting your hole through, and you drill into it. So this can get latched in to this, right? And it becomes, once I tighten everything down, it becomes the post driller, or the hole driller.
Mm-hmm.
And there are different size sets of them. These are used in large mechanisms as well as small. But that's what we would use if we're trying to do option 1 of the threading. And I had a small enough set. I really should go looking for a smaller set. So it was too beautiful to resist, though.
Yeah.
I thought you said that this was for option 2.
So no, sorry, for option 1 on the page 177, where he's showing the tap and die version, where you're threading. His drawing isn't terribly clear. The thing that looks like it has a hex bolt above it, that's the die. I think that's the die part, and the tap
Mhm.
part would be if we were putting a hole to drill it in. But in the case of a pearl, we don't need the other half of it. The pearl is the other half of it.
Okay.
Got it. So all that's doing is turning a piece of round wire into a screw. Okay, so with this one, oops, if I can figure out where I put that, there we go. I'm going to just use a ball burr instead of drilling a hole straight through. And it'd be really nice if my solder cam was showing, because you could see the difference. If I can swap cameras easily. I may take my other camera with me so that you guys can see this up close. If I can find my, oh. And a tiny little ball burr.
Oh, this is an extractor.
Bear with me, guys. My burrs fell all over the place from my new burr holder, and I'm still sorting through them.
Oh, that's awful.
There's somebody asking a question?
No, I just said that's awful. All
Oh,
of
that
them
they fell
fell
all
over.
over? Okay, so I'm gonna decide arbitrarily that I want this pearl a little off center, right about there. Oop. I'm gonna be messy with my. And I'm just making a divot that will hold the end of my, again, could be square wire, could be round wire. And I just need a clean end to my wire that will fit in there, which means I need to snip this off. And I'm going to actually end up doing a little tiny bit of filing to get a sort of a curved end that I can follow this newly made divot. Because what I want is for it, again, to have as much metal to metal surface area with the solder flowing all around it. So I'm just going to be soldering that into my divot instead of into the hole. Bear with me, gang. I'm going to take you guys for a ride for a minute and see if I can get this camera switched over so you can at least watch some from the soldering station. My phone, my other phone almost went in the drink. Okay. Are you guys seeing upside
down.
down? Hang
It's
on.
upside down.
See if I can get it to flip for us. Oh, come on, little guy.
There.
That's still upside down, isn't it?
It's doable. We can see from the side.
Yeah, we could see there.
There we go. Okay. So, sorry, it's not the super camera. For this version of it, I'm going to be working with the piece I'm attaching in my tweezers. Right, and I'm going to be doing a hold down to get it into place in the divot that I've got. And here's where the difference between putting it into a divot and putting it into through a hole. When I do my twist, there's a risk that if I haven't soldered it well enough, it's going to snap off when I twist the square wire in. Whereas if I push it through and solder from behind, not as likely to happen. I don't want too much solder because it'll be getting in the way. I want just enough that it's going to flow up from the end that I curved a little bit. I don't want to get my wire in there until I've got enough heat. So I'm waiting until I see the solder start to flow in the divot before I touch it down and solder it in place. Let it cool enough that it's not going to come undone on me. So that flicking action is really good when you have a much thinner piece going to a much thicker or larger piece, because it helps the heat spread a little bit. And so the nice thing about this version is we don't end up with something showing on the far side like we did on the other, like we did on the little tiny pearl cup we just did. So back to the other bench, we're gonna go on a journey again. Hang on. Seeing my messy studio since I haven't cleaned up since I was working for the show. And it's trying to turn me upside down again. Hang on a sec. There we go. We're good. All right. So back at the bench again. There we go. And once again, I'm going to snip off. Nope, sorry, I'm going to twist it first and hope that my solder joint is strong, so that my square wire gets that extra surface area. And I think I'm going to actually trim a chunk off of this just because it's almost unwieldy in its length. So use this also as an opportunity to straighten while adding those twists in. If you, by the way, are making post earrings and you're not doing this kind of a twist after you've done any heat work to it, but before you give it to the customer, you're doing your customer an injustice. Do this twist. You should at least spin it a 360 and pull it outward to straighten it as you go. But most good posts can go even further than that in their twist. So once again, I'm going to see how close I am. Oh, this end of the wire seems like it might be a little thicker, or this pearl is not as well drilled as the other. Let me switch to my third pearl. See if we got something a little better. I'm going to have to do a little drilling. Let me see if I can find my pearl reamer. Could have pulled it out before. Not in its usual abode. So you can carefully sometimes, and only by hand, use a regular drill bit to do reaming. But it tends to want to chip the nacre around the edges of the pearl. I'm going to do it out of desperation and because I've already managed to chip the nacre a little bit, so I'm not terribly worried.
Do you add water?
I
Or
don't.
no?
So you should, if you are doing active drilling, like dust in the air drilling, because pearl dust is pretty bad for you. But because I'm doing this manually and sitting at the bench here, I'm not sending it up in the air the way that I would if I were using a power drill. But yeah, good point. Stones, shells in particular, and pearls, all should be done with dust masks or with particulate masks and good ventilation. Oh, I think that'll work as a reamer. Nope, not that. You can tell how often I have to ream my pearls out. I usually just work with what I've got and make the post accordingly. Just cleaning up the top of the post because I managed to squish it so flat that it's wider at the top. Go past that one little spot. Come on, little guy. Okay, a little bit too long still. And one problem I've run into is occasionally I'll have used so much solder that I've got a little blob right at the base of my post, in which case you need to file it down to clean so that the pearl will rest all the way down against the post. That's not the problem I'm having here. The problem I'm having here is that this end of the wire was thicker than the one that I did before. So I'm running up against a wire that is too heavy, and I don't have my reamer, so I can't open up enough. Even with the drill bit, it's not really getting in where I need it to go. I'm going to leave this one here and I will find my reamer before we actually set it with the epoxy. But again, just another way of posting against a flat surface. And it'll look really nice. You know, that's a very simple setting. You get a pair of earrings, you put it, put some ear hooks on that. And it's a very simple, elegant little off-center. I would probably put my loop right about here so that it's hanging slightly akimbo. I'm not a huge fan of the straight up and down. So I'd want it a little bit off-center, but enough that it looks intentional instead of accidental. And this is what you would do if you're adding a pearl to a as a decorative element in a larger piece. You could use either of these techniques. You could put it in the cup and solder the cup to whatever you're working on. I also tend to do pearls using the decorative gallery wire. So bezel wire that's got fancier patterns to it. But even then, I'm making a flat disc with a post, and I'm using the gallery wire not as the holding element, but as a faux visual impact, looking like it's holding it. But what's really holding it is the center post that I've epoxied, right? Questions about either of those? Pretty straightforward stuff.
So your whole gallery, it's your gallery wire cup. I'm not picturing that. The whole
Let me
cup
see if I
is
have a
gallery wire.
Picture of one of my pearl pieces, or do I even have one sitting here? I don't have one sitting here. Let me see if I have one of my pieces that has a posted pearl, and I can share an image with you guys. Photos. Actions. Let's see, decorative. There we go. That's a good one. So, share screen. So,
Oh, nice.
you can see that you can add the decorative elements. Now, I tend to do these with a flat-backed pearl instead of a round pearl. So what's called a button pearl. Still has a half drill in it, but there's a post that goes up into the center, and I have made the bezel wire. So this is making the gallery wire. I bezel it like I would any traditional cabochon bezel with gallery wire. And then in the smack dab in the middle of that, I put a post and still do the epoxy part. Now
But
we're
the
gonna
back-
do, sorry, go ahead.
So the back of that is just a disc
A
and you
disc,
saw
yep,
gallery wire to that disc.
yep.
Okay.
And so I may not have actually started its life as a disc. I probably started its life as sheet. What made it disc-like is that I made my round gallery wire and soldered it down just like what I would if I were doing a cabochon, and then I trimmed to that circular shape. But if you've got a perfect fit, you can absolutely do a disc with a wire on it. I just find that my precision for getting something centered on another circle is not always there. So I'd rather make this be the circle and cut to it. So that's one decorative element. And they're great for post toppers, and you get a little movement on whatever you're hanging off of it. It's fantastic. But again, I could do the same thing with just a cup, but I'd need my cup to be big enough that it can support the attachment to the next piece down, right? So we talked about it, how John says he wants to do sort of a quarter to a third of the diameter. You're going to want to go a lot smaller if you're, I mean, a lot bigger, or give yourself a tab off of the dome for something to hang off of. Because what you don't want is whatever you've got swinging to be hitting the pearl itself, right? You need that connection point behind it. Another fun thing that I've done, let me see if I have those pictures with pearls is, yes, I do have this. So this pair, oh, sorry, that's a really tiny photo and it's not going to show very well for you, but this pair, these elements, this is the elements collection, and these are lightning bolts, swing on a post. And so I'm going to have to draw for you guys what I do for that kind of use of a pearl, because it is a little funky. And this is sort of related to what you asked about running a post all the way through. It's kind of that principle. What we're doing when we do a pearl with a moving dangle is, just get my pen back, there we go. The pearl in a cup with a post, and we're putting a stopper here, and we're using our jump ring for whatever the dangling element, in this case, my lightning bolt thing, right? So there's a little extension. This is my normal length post, and my ear wire, my capper would go there. Oop, that's not showing very well. Let me back up. Okay, so there's my lovely little pearl sitting on something like the base, the first one we did, right? And then that wire going through, that is the post invisibly in here. I did, in this case, run extra wire through. And then there's a little flat piece here. And this is not really well to scale. What really is the case is my jump ring is a fairly snug fit between this capper and this end piece. Just enough room for it to pivot. So the pearl is a step out by the thickness of a jump ring. Is that making any sense at all? I think I have this pair here.
What do you mean it's pivot? What's going to pivot?
So there's movement. If you were looking at it straight on and it were
Yeah,
hanging,
that would help.
you know, this is my lightning bolt. This can go this way and this way. The pearl stays in the ear. It's posted to the ear. So this is on our human being. There's my really wonky
Yeah,
ear.
I got it. Yep.
Yep. And this behind the scenes here, there's a tiny little jump ring on the post that comes out.
I get it now. Okay.
Yep. And so what you get is the benefit, the beauty and benefit of a static post without jump rings showing, for a really cool visual impact of movement. And it's not a forward back movement in that case, it's a left right movement. So it's just a gentle bit that goes with the piece. You'll see a similar effect. A lot of times people are making cappers, earring cappers, where you like nest a piece of an earring inside of another earring, and so you can swap them out. And if any of your cappers have a dangling element, you get that same effect. So pearls are really fun. I didn't used to be, they didn't used to be my jam. And now I've gotten to the point where I really enjoy a decorative aspect of a pearl. It's never the focal of my piece, but I do dangle off the end of a pendant or something like that. If I'm, if I have a drop, or I'm using a single set pearl to offset, like this piece that we just did, that's going to be set when it's properly sized, is a pretty elegant little basic setting. I would use that as a decorative element on something, or as a standalone earring, if I wanted to use up all my pearls. And boy, you start adding some texture behind it and some Kimbu gold strips behind that. There's a whole slew of simple variations you could do with just the circular form, or make a funky rectangular form and do a negative space inside of it. And so just jam off of the single glow of a pearl. Now, one of my absolute favorite things to do with pearls is to set them in water casting. Let me see if I can find a good pearl water cast element and show you guys. So, share screen. So instead of using a cup or a flat piece, I've just found the water castings that have the best curvature, and my post for the pearl goes in that, and it creates this nice glow. Heck, you do a little Kimbu gold behind it, boy, does that pearl pop, right? So there's all kinds of variations, as long as you understand the principle of, we're trying to get as much surface area on the post holding the pearl in place, and as much support as we can give it. That seems like a good place to stop. Let me grab out of the pickle our first setting. I'm going to tumble it between sessions, and we will set with epoxy and gloves the two pearls next time, and do our third variation on the pearls. And then we'll also actually set the square stones from this once I've got it polished up. But let me show you what it looks like coming out after our clean up in the pickle. And see if I have anything I can use as a neck ring. So here's our simple necklace piece. It's going to have some stones set in there, running down the front. Not much to it, quick and dirty. Well, not quick, as we saw. And that's a good basic bail for it. So there we go. Questions on any of the ones we hit today?
I have a question about the setting you just showed.
Yep.
Is there a reason, I'm sure it's probably more of a pain in the butt, why you didn't hammer it around a square piece of tool steel versus the round? To form the shape of it.
This?
No, back to the piece you were just showing just a second ago that you just finished.
The
one you just got out of the pickle.
I hammered it around. Yeah, I hammered it around a steel rod.
Right.
But you could absolutely make that square. Yeah, there's nothing.
And I was wondering if that would make it harder or not. And I'm wondering if the symmetry would stay a little better. Get wonky.
The symmetry, you're going to still have the same battle when it's annealed. But in square, so for me, if I were hammering it around square steel, I would probably instead be doing a box corner, like where I would file it,
right?
And
you'd score it. Yeah.
Yeah, scoring it, or even deep carving into it and soldering my corners, running some.
So that's a lot more work. Okay, that answers my question.
And it's honestly, it's going to be harder. You saw how much manipulation I was doing to try and get just the right tension.
Right.
When you've got a locked in square at the bottom, your flex is only at the top of it. Whereas with my U, I could adjust all along.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm not saying
Okay,
either
thanks.
right or wrong. I think it'd be gorgeous in a nicely squared up thing, but you're going to need some serious precision to get exactly your dimensions that you want to get it squared up.
Lots of practice. Okay.
Yeah, but boy, squared with the square stones, that'd be gorgeous. I want to see it when you do it.
Well,
Any other questions? And you know what's coming next, gang. I'm going to ask. Anybody have any show and tell?
Wendy raised her hand.
No, she was waving me off, I think.
I was waving goodbye.
All right, gang. So next session. Oh, that's the other thing. In 2 weeks is my Hollow Forms in Silver class. Registration still available up on the website. Super fun class. Just think about what you can do now that you can set a pearl inside of a negative space in a hollow form. Yeah, it's one of my favorites. I do dangle pearls in my negative spaces on hollow forms, or I do set.
Remember, that's what I did in your class.
Oh yeah. I do.
Set
Yeah.
a pearl inside that hollow form.
Yep. And
I'll have
doesn't
to
it look gorgeous?
Pull that out.
Yes, you will. You can bring it as an example for us. And then the other 2 classes are also open for registration.